Hello, friends. Welcome to English in London YouTube channel. I hope you all are doing well today. In this video, I'm going to tell you how to speak English fluently. Learning English is a big journey. We can improve our English with such beautiful stories. Let's listen to this story. This will improve your English speaking skills unprecedentedly. Do you want to improve your English? Do you want to speak English more fluently? You see, the English language changed my life. I was born in Hong Kong, so English is not my first language. My first language is actually Cantonese. My second language is Mandarin because my mother is from Taiwan, and my third language is English. So when I first immigrated to North America, I couldn't speak a word of English, and I know some of my viewers, rumors say that you're tuning into my videos because you want to learn how to speak the English language. I find that that's kind of interesting. So today, I want to share with you 5 steps to improve your English fluency, the 5 things that I did to learn the English language. Step number 1 to improve your English fluency. It's actually very simple, and that is, don't give a damn. That's right, don't give a damn. Speak whenever, wherever, however. It doesn't matter if you speak with an accent. I still speak with an accent, and I talk to tens of millions of people every single month. It doesn't matter. Forget how people would judge. Forget how people would think of you. All this stuff, it doesn't matter. Just speak as much as you could. If they don't understand you, say it again. If they don't understand you, say it again. You just keep saying it. I remember because I spoke with such a thick accent, I spoke like, it sounded like a famous action star. I can still speak with some accent like, hey, yeah, this, then that, like that kind of stuff. Like I could speak with that kind of accent, but you just speak. You just speak as much as you could because that's how you get comfortable. You would not guess if you're always thinking about, understand a culture. To understand philosophies, you need to understand the language. So when I learned the English language, then I also learned about a lot of other things about the culture, about business, of course. That's what I do. So language is not just something that you use to communicate. Language is also something that you could train your mind with. So understand that. Step 4. Immersion. You have to immerse yourself. So when I was learning the English language, what I did is I would listen to music every single day. I would listen to English music, English song, and try to sing along and just to learn it, right? It was very, very difficult, and I was listening to rap music, which is way too difficult. I gave that up, but I was watching English movies without subtitles, and I would listen, and at first, I wouldn't understand. I would understand maybe 5% of it, right? And then I would understand. I think it's like, that's what she means. And 10%, 20% as my English improves, I noticed I would understand the movie more and more and more, right? So you have to immerse yourself, talking English, listening to English music, watch English movies, do as much of that as you could. Naturally, you'll pick up the slang. You'll pick up certain stories or phrases, like that kind of phrases. That's how you learn the English language. Then you make it fun. So it doesn't have to be, you have to sit down and study, I'm studying the language. No, make it fun. Talk to people who speak English, right? Like interact, connect, read, watch, listen. That's how you get good. That's how I got good. Step number 5 to improve your English fluency, and that is to hang out with people who speak English. Like, I know it sounds so obvious, but that's how you do it. I remember in college, you would see these groups of people, and I would see the Chinese students only hang out with Chinese students. I would see the Korean students hang out with Korean students, and Japanese students hang out with Japanese students, right? And I would do the opposite. I would go and hang out with people who speak English. I would hang out with Americans. I would hang out with people who grew up locally, who speak perfect English, and I would just talk and hang out. We go to the library, and I would try to talk as much as possible, listen, ask questions, right? To get comfortable. And another thing that I did was actually, I got a Korean girlfriend who speaks English, right? So that's another way to do it. So I'm not saying that's the only way to learn, but if you want to learn a new language, take someone who speaks the language. You'll be shocked how quickly you pick that up, right? How quickly you can pick up the language. Let me give you a bonus tip, a bonus step, if you want it, okay? Step number 6, and that is going to a state of overlearning. Let me explain. If you are thinking about, let's say, learning a language, let's say you're here, and you want to get to this good. The fastest way to get to this good is you actually go into a state of overlearning. So let's take an exercise example, okay? If you want to have stronger biceps, let's say you're only doing your curl, you can only hypothetically lift 20 lbs. 20 lbs, right? That's much of strength you have if you want to make that 20 lbs. Easy to better lift that up? Guess what? You train with 25 lbs. Train with 30 lbs. That's an over-preparation, over-learning. That's what I mean, right? You want to stay over-learning. So what I did, because I'm in business, right? Not only learning English language, I was learning how to sell, how to close, how to do marketing. So not only just the English language day-to-day basis to communicate, but actually at a way higher level where there's something to lose, where it's not just learning the basic day-to-day communication, but also there's money involved, right? How I became a fluently English speaker alone. Now, I'm sure that you have had moments in your learning where you have felt like you progressed very quickly. It comes easily. You're motivated. It's fun. But at some point, you hit a wall and you feel like you'll never speak fluently, confidently, and naturally. You are not alone. This feeling of being stuck is often called the intermediate plateau, and I've been there. It can be a comfortable place. You can speak and understand in many situations, but for most of us, it's not enough. We want to enjoy the language as freely as we do our mother tongue as a native. I've never had the experience of learning English as a second language, so I want to bring you an expert who has successfully learned English as a second language, and if you listen to our podcast, chances are you have already heard me on there. But today I'm here to tell a little bit of my story and how I went from speaking zero English to the level of English I have today. I'm just like you. I'm an English learner myself, and I had to learn English from scratch in my country here in Brazil. I've never been abroad, so I'm going to tell you how I did it, and hopefully that's going to give you some ideas and inspiration for your English journey. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell down below, because every week we put out videos to help you speak English with confidence and naturally. So now let's get started. So my story with English began when I was 15 years old, and as I told you, I come from Brazil, and at that time, I knew zero English. You know, I couldn't speak anything. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. But at 15, something magical kind of happened because I started to have this desire to become bilingual. I don't know exactly why that was, but the idea of using two languages to communicate, to express myself, was very attractive to me. And I remember also that I looked around me, you know, I saw my family, my friends, you know, my social circle, and I realized that no one knew English. So I started to associate also the idea of knowing English with having a better life or having school. He took an English course, and he was really helpful because I talked to him, and he was kind enough to lend me his old course books, you know, because every semester his school would change the books. So the books that he wouldn't use anymore, he would lend them to me. So that's how I started. I started by studying with old course books from my friend and a grammar book that he had lent me, foreign studying by myself with those old books, you know. And I remember that I was really fascinated because English was always interesting to me. I always loved the language, but I was then actively studying it, right? I mean, I was reading stuff in English. I was copying stuff from the book that I saw, and I was already very excited because I was using another language to write or to communicate or to express myself. My speaking was really, really bad at that time, you know, so I couldn't speak yet. Even though I grew up kind of watching movies with my parents in English and listening to music in English as well, I didn't have my speaking skills so developed yet. I remember that I would try to read stuff out loud from the books that I was studying with. And it was a disaster because, you know, the words wouldn't flow. I had no idea how to pronounce certain words, for example, labdo, you know. It was really bad and frustrating, but I kept going because at the end of the day, that was all I did for pretty much 3 years, you know, from 15 to 18. Most of the time I would study with books, and that was the first mistake I made. And I'm here to tell you this because I took way too much time to learn to start speaking. You don't want to do that. And at that time, 20 years ago, it was much more difficult to find people to practice my speaking with, so I just studied with books at that time. But nowadays, we have so many more cool resources, you know, like apps. And thinking of apps, I can tell you about the real-life English app, as you probably know, and with the app, you can have conversations with people from all around the world at the touch of a button. Plus, you can listen to our podcast there, and with the transcripts, it's just amazing. So if you haven't downloaded the app yet, make sure you do that, because, you know, that is one of the resources that, for example, I wish I had when I was learning English and trying to improve my speaking 20 years ago. Music. But then something magical happened in my life when I turned 18. I started working, and I have to say that my work experience, you know, the jobs that I've had in my life, they were crucial in my English development, especially the speaking and the listening skills. Let me explain. My first job was at a drugstore, and I worked as a cashier there. But there was something interesting about that drugstore, because that peers, they would see me at lunchtime, kind of eating and studying at the same time. So pretty quickly, I became the English guy at the drugstore. So every time a foreign customer came in, I was the one to be called, "Hey, Chicago, there's a foreign person there, a foreign customer. Go help that person." Then I would go there and then speak in English with those people and try to help them out, right? I remember one time, it was kind of funny, I was at the cash register and I was talking to this American customer. She was a lady, and then, I was trying to talk to her in English and explain to her that I had never been abroad and everything, but I was still learning the language. And then I said, "Oh yeah, I've never been abroad." And then she kind of stopped me, and then she said, "Oh, I think you mean abroad." And I was like, "Oh, abroad. Oh, thank you very much for the correction. I appreciate that." So that was, one example, of how having these little interactions with these customers helped me because, sometimes I would say something wrong, like abroad, and then the person would help me by correcting me. And I had many of these small interactions at that time that were really useful. And this is another tip that I can give you. Be open to correction, because if somebody corrects your English or your pronunciation or the way you use a word, this is actually great for speaking to Americans on the phone 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for a year. So that, in a way, it was my version of living abroad. It was my version of having an exchange program because I was really speaking to natives for a year. Yeah, and that really helped me with my speaking skills and my listening skills. But it's important to mention that I only got that job because I already knew English enough to get that job. So all those years that I spent before, working and studying and learning paid off because those years allowed me to get this job, and then I improved even more. So here's what I have to say to you. Keep learning, keep developing yourself, and start looking for job opportunities that allow you to use your English on a daily basis, because then you're going to improve even more. And between those jobs, that was actually the moment when I really started to create my own immersion in English now, because I was already kind of using English on my daily routine there at work. And then I was really serious about it, like, everything I made sure that I did in English. So watching movies in English, series, listening to music. I love rock and roll, for example, so, I always listened to my favorite bands in English. And with my very first paychecks, actually, that's what I did. We didn't have Netflix at that time or streaming services, so I actually would go to media to learn English. By the way, if you want to learn or to know my exact step-by-step process that I used to improve my English with movies and TV series, let us know in the comments. Maybe I can make another video in the future for you explaining how I did it. All right? Finally, there is one weird thing that happened in my life that really helped me take my English to the next level, and that was becoming an English teacher. I started teaching English at 21 years old, so it's been 14 or 15 years now already, and I have to say that teaching English and helping people with their English was actually an experience that really helped me master the English language to a whole another level because, when you teach, it's like you are learning again. Because if I have to teach a class or help someone, I have to prepare, right? I have to study the topic myself. I have to be familiar with the topic. I have to think of different ways to explain things, to give examples, and that mental process really helps me better understand the topic so then I can explain that to my students. So it's a win-win. If you teach somebody, you win because you are kind of revising information and studying it again, and the other person is also benefiting because the person is learning new stuff with you. And I've had the pleasure of working with more experienced teachers, over the years.